Oh, it is so good to be back out again. We just had that little tiny bit of a lockdown here in my state here in Queensland, Australia. Gratefully, that has now ended and I'm back out. The very first thing I've done is I've grabbed my camera and I've come back out to do some photography. And as I say this, I've got an Osprey and he's just going to fly right over top of my head here. Good to be back. This afternoon I'm visiting one of my favourite locations at Beachmere in Queensland, Australia. I've packed my Nikon D850 along with a couple of lenses and I'm going to try looking for interesting patterns in the sand as the tide goes out. As beautiful as what it is to be out, it's extremely windy here today, so my sincere apologies for any wind noise you might hear on my microphone during this video. Ideally, I want to create some long exposure images as the sun sets that are not only minimalist in composition, but also have interesting patterns in the foreground. For about the last hour, I've been trying to walk around looking for the magic S-curve going out to sea so I can do this long exposure shot. But one thing that just really stuck out as I was walking out here is I found this bit of sand. Now, here at Beachmere, it's just all sand, but there's this one patch that I found and these big conglomeration of shells. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that as a foreground. And then in the background, I found this nice little curve of a channel going off out into the distance. And I think that should make for a really nice shot. So I'm going to set up here with the Nikon D850. I'm going to put my 16 to 35mm lens on. And I'm going to probably do this in two shots. I'm going to have the first shot in the foreground. I'm going to focus in the foreground, get a shot there. Next shot, I'm going to focus off in the background. And that's probably going to be my long exposure shot. So hopefully by the time I put those two together in Photoshop, should end up for a nice composition. I'm now just into the second part of the shot where I've just dropped my 10 stop. That's the big stopper Lee filter into the front of the camera here. I'm sitting at f11, I've got 1/10 of a second. Using the big stopper, that has now made that, I've got to do an exposure of 1:40. So I'm just underway on doing that. I won't go into too much detail the way I like to do my long exposures with the Nikon D850. I've already done a video on that and I'll just leave it up here for you to have a look at a little bit later on. I've just finished doing that long exposure shot there, but beautiful sunset over here. So I'm just going to try and get a nice shot here quickly. Just going to use this S-bend in the water just here as my foreground. How amazing is this sunset? I'm getting all these beautiful colors up here. I'm very tempted. I'm going to have a quick go at doing a long exposure on this one. So I really want to take advantage of these sunset colors. So I've turned around, headed out to the west here, and I'm getting this really beautiful reflection of the colors coming down into the sand. And the sand has got this incredibly beautiful pattern right through it. So I'm using that as my foreground. And then I've got the sunset going off into the distance here. I've got a long exposure happening at the moment. I'm sitting at f11. I was getting a reading of around about 1/13 of a second at f11 ISO 64. I'm sitting at about 24 mil, and that gave me a reading of about 1:40 in exposure time. So I'm almost there, about another 30 seconds and we'll see what the shot looks like. Well, that's it, guys. I'm going to leave it here from Beachmere in Queensland, Australia. So good to be out of lockdown to come out and enjoy this beautiful countryside. Feel that beautiful fresh air. As I always say, never stop creating, and I'll see you next time. Just one little tip before I go. Make sure you wash your tripod off as soon as humanly possible, because what happens is the salt and little bits of grit, it's not so much the legs, it's the clips here that get all the grit and the salt into them. So get that off as fast as you can. Either you do it here on location or as soon as you get home, get it off. Then what I do is I get a little bit of lubricant and I spray into these joints just to make sure that I don't get any sort of stiffness or rust occurring in there. Trust me, if you leave that for more than a day or two, I think you'll find those clips will be very hard to close in the future.